Transcending history and the world, a tale of souls and swords, eternally retold.
It was 2002 when the long-awaited sequel to Soul Calibur, simply named Soul Calibur 2, hit the console market, making its way onto the GameCube, Xbox, and of course, the PlayStation 2. I was about 4 or 5 when my family got the game. It became a group activity to play the weapon-based one-on-one fighter game. We all clung to different characters. My brother often chose Astaroth, a monster resembling one of his beloved Ben 10 transformations, whereas my mother chose the scantily clad dominatrix Ivy. There was a clear distinction. Men could be skinny to muscular, from human to monster to even god. But women, on the other hand, were all conventionally attractive, slim, human women in tight, impractical clothing. I, of course, chose to play as one of the female fighters, and her name was Cassandra. She was the younger sister of the more central female lead, Sophitia. She was a holy warrior based around Greek mythology, but unlike her sister, she wore more and acted more tomboyish. For my young child self, she was perfect for very two simple reasons. Like me, she was a younger sister, and like me, she donned a short blonde bob cut. That's really all I needed. I admired Cassandra and I idolised her, wanting to be just like her, working hard to recreate her moves with a bin lid and a lightsaber toy, pretending they were my very own Omega sword and Nemea shield. After relentlessly playing with our PS2, it eventually kicked the bucket though. And it wouldn't be for another few years before we got our hands on a second-hand PS3. I eagerly got the newest game for my beloved series, Soul Calibur 4. I excitedly hunted through the roster of fighters for my girl, and when I eventually found her, I barely recognised her. The name was the same, sure, but the design was different. I took her for a run to see if I could remember the movesets, and surely enough I did. They were slightly different though. Her moves felt smoother and more energetic, and she swayed in a way that emphasised her femininity, which was odd. But then I got to try out the new finisher move, a special attack they added, where you can deal large amounts of damage like no other. Unlike other fighters, whose special attacks involved bouts of fire and battle cries and grunts, Cassandra's, strangely enough, doused the stage in a haze of pink mist as she playfully knocks the person down, landing to sit on their face, with hearts spawning from the move as she asks, "You like this kind of stuff?" This was not Cassandra. This was not the cool, tomboyish warrior I knew and loved. As I grew older, however, I learnt to understand that the reason she was so vastly different, wearing a skimpy leotard with minimal armour and coverage, instead of her traditional skirt, shirt and legging combo, was for a very simple reason. She was old enough to be sexualised. Now Cassandra was older and available to be sexualised, the Soul Calibur team went all in, and while adding her to their list of various eye candy characters that clearly were just appealing to the male fantasy, they were also creating some deep-rooted issues for the little girls like me who saw themselves in her, who idolised her. I always would wonder if I wanted to be like her. What did this change mean for me and for my forming identity? How would people perceive me? Little did I know, as a young naive child, that I was growing up in a world where games were only expanding and exploding in popularity and production, while the people creating them had always had rampant issues with sexism and misogyny. They consistently implanted their own unsettling ideas and creepy gaze into their games.
Damsels and trophy wives. Since the very beginning of the games industry, it, like many others, has been male-dominated, having been made by and made for men. The issue of female characters being over-sexualised and commodified to sell male fantasy has been discussed over and over the many years, spiking again recently with the popularisation of the term the male gaze. a term coined by Laura Mulvey in relation to a theory of sexualizing and objectifying women in the way they are portrayed and framed in media, taking the perspective of a heterosexual man, depicting women as nothing more than something for men to view, own, and conquer. Female characters tended to fall into one of two categories, either a damsel in distress or eye candy, both usually resulting in the female having no autonomy, being used as a trophy wife, or used as a tool for the male character's growth. For example, a woman being used as stolen goods to provide motivation for the male protagonist, rather than being her own individual, fully realised person. Super Mario Bros. Was released in 1985, introducing the infamous Italian plumber to the world in his very first mainline game after parting ways with Donkey Kong to pursue his own original story. Alongside this came the introduction of Princess Peach, a beloved character of the franchise today, created by Shigeru Miyamoto as an honorary damsel in distress. When women give their opinion on Peach, I've noticed a common trend. They adored her when they were younger, as she was the only girl in the game. However, as they grew up, they became increasingly frustrated with her trophy-like position, enjoying the gameplay rather than the characters, since Peach lacked any autonomy. This, however, was slightly challenged in the newest mainline game, Super Mario Odyssey. The story does continue the traditional format. Bowser kidnaps Peach, and you as Mario must rescue her. However, as you reach the final scene, Mario approaches Peach to finally propose. However, Bowser swiftly barges in as both aggressively try to propose to her, and for the first time, Peach isn't dismissive towards his feelings. Rather, she bluntly rejects both of them, storming off home, taking the Odyssey ship and abandoning the pair as they wallow pathetically together. Later on, post-game, she is seen travelling the world independently, fully capable and grounded, not quite the damsel in distress anymore, nor fawning over Mario in an act of gratitude or as a reward. She merely greets him like any other person. There was recently a trailer released for the upcoming Super Mario movie, coming in spring 2023, where it depicted Luigi, Mario's brother, as the damsel and Peach as the hero, taking the lead alongside Mario. These changes over recent years have changed Peach's profile as a character significantly, and the way we identify her is beginning to shift away from the traditional fairy tale narrative of a male hero and a female damsel. Nintendo also has another famous damsel, Princess Zelda of Hyrule, from the series The Legend of Zelda. The fated hero Link defeats evil incarnate Ganon, and in doing so rescues Zelda. However, Zelda is an equal third of the Triforce. Link is courage, Ganon is strength, and Zelda is wisdom. So why the damsel treatment? Surely she's powerful enough. Hell, the only time the princess is taken seriously is when she disguises herself as a man, such as Sheik. However, in the latest mainline installment, Zelda Breath of the Wild, while you play as Link, the story expands more on Zelda's character and motives through a series of regained memories and diary entries. Zelda certainly had personality in prior games, but it was always quite minimal and safe, and didn't allow fans to empathise with her on a human level. However, this game works to humanise her as she trains tirelessly to awaken the sacred power within herself, praying incessantly and disregarding her own desires. Zelda takes on this responsibility single-handedly, blaming herself for not being able to provide the power to save Hyrule. Strangely enough, the way she awakens the sacred sealing power is not through the gods, but by devoting herself to protecting Link. Alongside her in-depth understanding of the Guardians, mechanical beasts that she had dedicated herself to researching in preparation for the war. After she had finally awoken the power, Link collapses, now being on the brink of death. Instead of being the damsel in distress in the situation, it becomes her role to save his life, putting him into an 100-year stasis to recover. When you inevitably wake as Link and go on to fight Ganon, rather than saving Zelda, you are instead backing her up, as she has been in an 100-year-long battle with Ganon, needing the Triforce of Courage, Link, to help shift the tide of the battle between strength and wisdom. Zelda is even the one to deliver the finishing blow. This is significant, as it shows serious development of Princess Zelda and her drifting away from the perception of being a weak and powerless side character, and instead focusing more centrally on her in the plot, and her empowerment as well as expressing her flaws, humanising her and giving her room for genuine believable growth that we can become invested in. She has gone from disinteresting damsel to a well-developed character that we, the audience, can enjoy, relate to, and invest in. Often women tend to lose interest in games that see them as nothing more than sexual objects or trophies. So it's no surprise that these issues run rampant in mostly male-dominated genres, such as fighter games. These developers seem to misunderstand that they are isolating an entire half of their audience. Women make up currently 48% of gaming audiences, according to a study by Jay Clementine that looks at what percentage of gamers in the US identify as female. Women have made up a sizable portion of gamers for decades, all the while being underrepresented and ignored by game developers, within the creation of the media, characters, and even the marketing. Maybe what they need is women in the workforce to help shift the perspective. The reality of the workplace. The rates of female employment within the gaming industry has been consistently, utterly, and abysmally low. A 2008 report by the online games magazine MCV found that core creation and developmental roles for women in the industry sat at an incredibly small 6.9%. How can an industry half funded by women have less than a tenth of its core workers even be female? It's just downright absurd. It is not that women are not interested in the industry either. Rather, they are downright ignored and robbed of opportunities, being seen as lesser than and incompetent in the field. In a 2009 skill set study, they found that women represented 4% of the game industry's workforce, a third of the 12% they found only 3 years prior in a previous study. This encompassing both the developmental and non-developmental roles women occupied within the industry. A decade later, in 2019, according to business data platform Statista, the number had significantly grown to 24% of game developers being female, against a whopping 71% of developers being male, and the other 4% belonging to either transgender, non-binary, or other identities. While this is an incredible amount of progress and an impressive feat, it is only a step in levelling the playing field, and while numbers may grow, another issue rises. Many female employees say that they are less respected, are not taken as seriously, and often get the short end of the stick, having to work 10 times harder just to be robbed of promotions and better roles in favour of a male employee. In some cases, this escalates further into sexual harassment and workplace abuse. I'd like to take a moment to talk about the company Activision Blizzard, a hot topic as of late, having recently been taken to court over mountains of allegations of sexual harassment, abuse, and hostility. Activision Blizzard faced a lawsuit for their mistreatment of their female employees. The court documents state, unlike its customer base of increasingly diverse player, defendants' workforce is only about 20% women. Its top leadership is also exclusively male and white. They go on to discuss the issue of top positions being exclusively held in the past and present by white men, going on to say that the few women who do reach higher roles earn less salary, incentive pay, and total compensation than their male peers. While this is evident across the industry, the popularity of the 2021 case brought it under the public eye more. However, this is only a portion of the case. What it focuses on heavily is not just the underpayment and underemployment of women, but the hostility, sexual harassment, and abuse they face. Defendants have also fostered a pervasive frat boy workplace culture that continues to thrive in the office. Women are subjected to cube crawls, where male employees drink copious amounts of alcohol and often engage in inappropriate behaviour towards female employees. They are described to have delegated their work responsibilities to female employees while slacking off playing games all day, while openly they engage in banter about their sexual encounters, talk openly about female bodies, and joke about rape. And the worst part is, this is not uncommon within the industry. While the games industry needs a shift in employment, having a larger female workforce doesn't entirely fix it, as there are still inherent issues of misogyny, creating a workspace where it's debatable whether or not they'll be treated well. Some refuse to acknowledge the improvements they would bring to the teams and instead see it as merely a statistic they must somewhat fix for appearances. But what's the point of a 20% female employment rate when they are actively making the workplace a living hell for them and underestimating and underusing them? It's just a shameful waste of incredible talent. While AAA gaming companies' rates of female employment slowly increase, it's important to check whether or not they are being mistreated, since a woman's safe space is certainly not within a company's office that has fostered sexist and misogynistic ideals both in their products and inside of their staffing. However, not all is bad. This Activision Blizzard lawsuit resulted in an $18 million settlement and has shaken the industry itself, bringing the issues to light and urging others to change their attitudes, as this behaviour will no longer be ignored and excused. Let's go back to the 2000s, where a certain game developer had a new concept for a game with a female protagonist for a change, who found it essential to hire a woman to design the cast of his latest game, seeking a woman's touch for the project.
Bayonetta. How Bayonetta came to be. Hideki Kamiya was well known within the industry for his trademark stylish action games of the past, originally working for Clover Studio, who were responsible for Capcom's Beautiful Joe 2, Okami, and God Hand. All very great action games that severely underperformed at the time, resulting in Clover unfortunately disbanding. Kamiya and his fellow staff members would start from scratch, building a new team working under Sega. This development team would go on to become Platinum Games. In the early days of Platinum, Kamiya worked on primarily what he admitted were cash grab games. However, an ex-Capcom dev and fellow employee, Yusuke Hashimoto, had noticed Kamiya working on an unusual project ideas that seemed strangely out of character for him. In a casual conversation, he brought up the topic of new projects and Kamiya going back to his roots and creating a thrilling, stylish action game like he had in the past. After the conversation, Kamiya was inspired and quickly came up with new ideas for a new badass action title. Since the team were familiar with making these sort of games, they decided to play into their strengths, their mission statement for this new project being to create a methodical and acrobatic 3D action game, the production of which we would face head-on as a team, pouring every ounce of our knowledge and skill into achieving our objective. Bayonetta was the perfect project for the team. Their vision came together quickly, and they even called themselves Team Little Angels. The idea for gameplay, character and story came together very early on in development, the titular character's name being decided upon from the very beginning. Bayonetta, quite literally a feminisation of a weapon, a bayonet, simply adding an A to the end. It's a little cheesy, but it fits the campy vibe of the game. The concept from day one was an ancient witch revived in modern times. One who could fight short range, punching and kicking with her guns, as well as shoot from afar. And thus the angel smiting, demon summoning, quad pistol wielding witch was born. Bayonetta was built to be a new iconic female character in an area that Kamiya felt severely lacked it. Feeling he had done all he could with male protagonists, he wanted a breath of fresh air, stating, "We wanted to bring a new flavour into the market, and I knew a female lead would accomplish exactly that." Bayonetta is known for her dominatrix look, and at first glance, some people even call her out for being the epitome of male gaze. But I believe this is a crude misunderstanding of the very essence of her. To begin with, Kamiya believed she must be designed by a woman to avoid any misrepresentation, wanting to give her an unmistakably female perspective to her design and fashion. He knew from the beginning that he wanted the female designer, Mari Shimazaki, for the project. Kamiya asked Mari to design a character with 3 traits. 1. A female lead. 2. A modern witch. And 3. She uses 4 guns. As well as Kamiya's insistence on her having a black wardrobe, feeling it was the most natural choice for a witch. Mary began drawing dozens and dozens of designs with a range of cool, chic, fashionable styles. Most of the early drafts were the ones that stuck, and were the very foundation for her final design. She dons a beehive hairstyle to resemble a witch's hat, wearing a bodysuit for flexibility and agility, and her hair being an integral part of her design, her clothes even being made out of it, and coming off when she needs to use it for a demonic summon, called a wicked weave, visually reflecting the limit of her power she is using at any given time. This usage of her hair ties to old witchcraft's placement of importance on hair. In folklore, witches' magical powers are said to be bound to their hair, so much so that in witch hunts of times long past, they would often shave the heads of those suspected to be witches. It was to make them powerless, humiliate, and weaken them. Mary states in an early blog post, "Bayonetta's long hair is the source of her power, and she normally wears it around her body in means of adornment and protection. Bayonetta uses these powers to change up her hairstyle and fashion whenever she so pleases, being a very proud, fashionable woman who refuses to be outdated." Platinum was so insistent on her being iconic and fashionable that her body's elongate proportions resemble that of the fashion sketches. Fitting the aesthetic, Bayonetta even struts through the game as if she were on a catwalk. Platinum even went so far as to hire a Ukrainian model, Olena Dats, to do an editorial fashion-style photoshoot alongside a live-action advertisement cosplaying her to promote the game in Japan. Subverting the male gaze.
Nothing. Damn. What the?
I've often seen a girl without lipstick, but lipstick without a girl? Most curious, isn't it, Cheshire?
Going back to Mulvey's theory, she speaks on how women in film are sexualised to disarm them and make them unthreatening. Bayonetta contrasts this, as her sexualisation only empowers her and makes her even more ridiculously strong. But back to the topic of wicked weaves. This leads to scenes in the game where she uses particularly strong attacks, such as demon summoning, where her hair-made outfit slips away in favour of controlling a hellish monster. Even as this summon leaves her body exposed, she's not embarrassed. It isn't done in a way that makes her look weak or vulnerable. Rather, she's displaying such immense power in that moment that the very thought of objectifying her is near impossible. She's a character who owns her body and sexuality like no other. The game views Bayonetta as an active subject, rather than a passive object that is purely for male erotic gratification. Platinum also seem to go out of their way in how they angle and show Bayonetta. In Mulvey's theory, it discusses how a woman's body is segmented and filmed in parts by the camera. But in Bayonetta, she is shown in full body shots, showing her as a full person, rather than objectifying her parts. There is a scene in the intro sequence when she is first shown fighting the Divine and angelic spears slice her clothes off of her body. The camera purposely runs along sexual parts of her body, alongside soft moan sounds accompanying it. But it is abruptly cut off by Bayonetta's battle grunts. Before you can digest this as erotica, she swiftly switches into a bodysuit, battling the angels with fierce, unyielding power. Platinum used this scene to subvert expectations, almost parodying the idea of being able to objectify her. As soon as the camera begins to do so, Bayonetta reclaims the spotlight, quite literally, demanding attention and respect as she delivers a thrilling, angel-destroying spectacle. Even in the fighting sequence, she lines up a row of angels and teases with, "Do you naughty angels deserve a good spanking?" before crushing their skulls. She is clearly the one in power and in control of the situation. Even as you play, she's so small on the screen in comparison to the grand set pieces, the giant angels she fights, and bouts of attacks being thrown around non-stop. You cannot view her through any of the three angles the male gaze theory discusses, those being the camera, the male protagonist, and the viewer.
because Bayonetta is just so clearly not shot or delivered with any male gaze in mind. Another aspect is her interactions with the three male characters in the game: Enzo, Rodin, and Luca. These three men play an important role in establishing Bayonetta's position alongside men. Starting off with Enzo, her informant. Often described as a bumbling idiot, he's the kind of guy who admires and acts as if he were in the mob, but in reality he's an undertaker and an underground informant. Enzo befriended Bayonetta at Rodin's bar and became indebted to her after she killed a criminal, Eggman the Destroyer, who had clashed with Enzo, making threats on his and his family's lives. As repayment, Enzo has become Bayonetta's informant, an ally who owes his life to her. The other two characters are more central to the plot and act almost as parallels to one another, one being a respectable cool guy type and the other being comedic relief. Let's talk about Luca first, the comedic relief. Luca Redgrave is a journalist trying to prove the existence of Umbran witches, a clan that died out centuries ago, Bayonetta being one of the two lone survivors. Throughout the game, Luca chases after Bayonetta, determined to gather evidence of her existence. However, Bayonetta dismisses him and his unwarranted stalking. But over the course of the game, she somewhat befriends him, seeing him as useful to babysit a lost child who gets wrapped up in and amongst the fighting, only giving him slight attention when she can seek to gain something from it, so she can continue on with her mission. Over the course of the game, Luca begins viewing her differently. Having now met her in person, he begins to see her through the male gaze, acting inappropriately with unwarranted advances, displaying clear signs of objectification and sexualization. Him sexualizing her is unlike when Bayonetta embraces her own sexuality, because when he does it, she is not in control of the perception of herself. However, Bayonetta does not let this bother her. She isn't creeped out, nor does she reciprocate any of these advances. Rather, she teases him or downright dismisses him. Once again, Bayonetta is shutting down the male gaze, much like the intro sequence. Rodin, on the other hand, is not a parody of the male gaze, but rather how a man should be. He is the owner of the bar, the Gates of Hell, and Bayonetta's weapon dealer. Being a fallen angel turned ungodly powerful demon, Rodin is a force to be reckoned with, much like Bayonetta. He treats her as an equal and clearly holds great respect for her, keeping their relationship strictly business first, friends secondarily. There's even a scene in the game where this dynamic is best summarised.
Real cute. But let's get one thing straight. Your fights are yours alone. I'm only here to watch my handiwork in action. So don't get any bright ideas about coming to me for help.
No. You get one thing straight. I'm not the slightest bit interested in the fact that you made these guns. If you get in my way, I will... How do the Americans put it? Oh, yes. Bust a cap in yo ass.
Right on, baby.
Rodin
Right
makes it
on.
clear that he will stay out of Bayonetta's business, and she firmly tells him to not get in her way, which Rodin responds, "Right on, baby, right on," agreeing and displaying respect. They know each other's places, and I believe this is a very charming dynamic and shows both equally in a good light, allowing the player to receive it this way. Neither are putting down or saving the other. There is no traditional gender bias, just two people. In conclusion, it is made very clear that Bayonetta doesn't rely on any man, even near the ending of the game when Bayonetta is in need of rescue for the first time. It's not a man that rescues her, but rather another woman, that woman being Jean, the only other survivor of the Umbran Coven, Bayonetta's equal and eventually, what is heavily implied to be, her romantic partner. What do people think of the witch today? Bayonetta has been a controversial character since the game's initial release in 2009. She's towed the line very finely between being an ideal candidate for the male fantasy or an empowered female icon. The general consensus is that those who have not played the game assume she is the initial, and those who have played it find she is the latter. However, I thought it would be good to do some of my own research to see how this general consensus holds up today, how various people see her, and if they believe female creatives should be responsible for female character designs. My survey reached a variety of gaming communities, with respondent rates being 51.25% female, and at a rate of 80% of participants answering that they do in fact tend to prefer to play as female characters. I know I'd hit my target demographic. I wanted to gather the perspectives of people more inclined to care about the matter at hand. My next line of questioning focused on Bayonetta herself. 20% didn't know Bayonetta, 51.25% did, and a sizable portion of 28.75% were in fact passionate fans. I could gather a good look at how they viewed her. 50% said they agreed she was good representation and a great heroine, lining up with my theory that those who played the game view her as a feminine icon. Results also aligned many of those familiar with her to hold her in a higher regard, and often as an impressive female lead. In more specific notes off participants, there was a suggestion that her recent boom in popularity had exposed her to new audiences that reflected today's cultural shift away from the slut-shaming of the 2000s to a more modern, sex and body positivity-centred culture. Her being generally better received today than at the time of her debut, while 6.25% of people disagreed, 43.75% neither agreed nor disagreed. There is much less animosity towards her, and people's responses were much more balanced than they had been in the past. I notice a trend of people pointing out that she is one extreme example and does not represent the female identity as a whole. Many women cannot align themselves with Bayonetta, as their sexual identity is not something they are openly flamboyant about. She's not terrible, but rather not the be-all end-all of female character design. One respondent even points out how they believe Bayonetta is derived from purely male gaze to begin with, others sharing this view incorrectly believing her to be designed by a man. But they still did show some level of respect for her, stating that she comes off as an effortlessly confident and powerful character who literally uses her sexuality to save the world. Then they ask, is she the best representation? No, but she is compelling and inspiring in her own right. The shift is evident, even for those who do not understand Bayonetta's agenda, but people of today have higher standards and are left wanting more than one which to fix the problem. Should female creatives take the lead in female character design? I curiously asked the opinions of my respondents, and I got some very interesting takes. While a small minority said things such as, we shouldn't restrict those who can design characters, there was a much greater belief that it is undeniable that women should be highlighted and even preferred for the roles of designers of female characters. It is indisputable that regardless of a small good minority, there is a roaring majority of male designers intentionally or unintentionally implementing the male gaze in a harmful way. Men cannot possibly fully understand the experiences of women, their perception of other women and themselves. They can learn, but who would know this better and be able to portray it better than a woman herself? There is also a severe lack of female designers within the industry, and it's a crying shame, as some of the best female representation in media has come from female-led creative teams. Some of these creatives being Siobhan Reddy, Brenda Romero, Van Mai, and Ikumi Nakamura. They have the skill set and perspectives desperately needed to build interesting, in-depth, well-designed characters, yet women are robbed of the opportunity. Such is the case with Activision Blizzard, men being preferred for better roles in the industry. From this survey, I can clearly tell that female gaming audiences are tired of men controlling women's bodies within games. They want good representation, and to avoid any internalised gazes and biases, it would be better to prioritise women in these job roles. Not exclusively, however. We should not restrict artistic freedom, as anyone from any gender is capable of creating a good character with enough research and work. But these creatives should be looked at closer, and female opinion should be considered, whether it be as an editor, advisor, or other female employees also playing a crucial part in the design team. Whether the woman is the direct designer or a secondary opinion, they must be present and they must be heard. So, what next? Well, my hopes are that as the gaming industry continues to grow, we will see a shift towards a more diverse workforce, one that can improve and expand the work of female character designers. With this, we'll be able to move away from the misogynistic culture within the industry and the prevalence of the male gazes of the past. The industry's infamous issue of large-scale misogyny and perverse objectifying culture needs to be put to an end. While it may be difficult to entirely shift the opinions of a portion of the current male audience, it will be a great step in the right direction for a real change for women's representation in media. Aiding the change of behaviour in male gamers towards real-life women, as well as making gaming a comfortable, fun experience for its large and steadily growing female audience. I'm absolutely sick to death of men being the ones to control women's bodies in games and distorting them for their own erotic fantasy. So it's time to take back control by utilising the underused and underappreciated female creative talents to make this change happen. I hope to become one of these female creatives one day, who can share my art and bring my own perspective and spark to a dev team. Hopefully I will also be able to personally help make a step towards greater LGBT+ representation in the field too. But that's a story for another video. For now...
Let's dance, boys!